I left, and Linda's like, oh, that was beautiful, baby. You'll find out, right? Anyway, what happened after that was I actually went back several times, and this particular lioness decided that I am her bitch. Because every time I go, that lioness comes out, and she looks right at me as if we saw each other yesterday, and she holds me to account each and every time and communicates. And I love her, and I dream about her, and I would have never said that before that experience, because I was a hardcore consultant in DC kind of guy. Didn't believe in any woo stuff, and didn't believe that I could be taken down by anything. And seeing those lions really humbled my life and changed it radically. So I'm gonna be introducing Linda, but of course she's walked away now, which happens a lot. So Linda Tucker has been working with the White Lion Protection Trust. She actually established it for 30 years and has given her life to the lions, and has been such an inspiration to meet a woman, a white woman in South Africa, that has chosen to take on the poaching industry, the gaming industry, to protect these sacred animals, and there's very, very few of them. So I don't want to take any more time, but because she's more important. So I'm not an important person anymore. She is.
Woo! So you're going to stay right here, Billy. What Billy didn't tell you is that he went through an initiatory course in lion-hearted leadership, which concluded with the pledge to nature and to be the highest and best version of himself, which is what is happening in his life. So I'm going to change this hat, which is the logo of the White Lion Protection Trust. I think it's time, Billy, to this one. Lion-hearted, truly. Woo-hoo! Okay. Let me see if I can beat my pride. This comes in and out of it, does it? Okay, so if I don't switch my hands, so it feels like home in a strange way. All these friends and supporters and animal lovers, that's what I feel here. There is one heart, the heart of nature that unites us with the source. I often speak about the fact that we're living in a time when we recognize humanity has become dehumanized. Humanity has become, we've lost our nature, we've lost our true humanity. To find our way back, we need to find our true natures again and our true humanity. And I love that word, humane. When you work with the White Lions, you see the sacredness embedded in everything. So listen to that word. The true human is humane. The light, the radiance of the mane. There is a profound connection between humanity and the lion through our long history on this planet. We've always aspired to be the apex animal. You'll see leaders throughout the world lionize themselves, and not always in the best way. ISIS, the terrorist group, is constantly seeing themselves as lions, but are they worthy of that label? When we are the true versions of ourselves, I've come to know, then we approximate the condition of the white lion. So what you see behind me are lions in my project who have returned to the wild. Now I'm going to cover a lot of time, a timeline of 30 years, because I want to share with you a quantum shift that I made in my life that I think is highly relevant to all of us. We're living at a critical time in humanity's evolutionary cycle. Some of us are more aware of it than others, but all of us, I believe, and particularly after COVID, know that humanity is on a precipice. Everything depends on whether we can reconfigure our relationship with Earth. It's at the end of a long, long period of exploitation, which is also known as the consumerist culture, that has taken, basically treated our Earth like one big supermarket and one bigger trash can. This is our mother. This sentient being, Gaia, has given us everything, every breath that we've taken, everything goes back to nature. And I know there are a couple of astrologers in our audience, so you might speak into this when we open up to questions afterwards. But we're living at a time when all the ancient calendars are converging, almost like the dial on a safe, in one moment, one great turning point, and that is the Gregorian calendar, the ancient Egyptian calendar, the Vedic calendar, the old African calendar, and then there's a huge calendar that is known as the turning of ages. Here in Hollywood, close to Hollywood, we know about the age of Aquarius, the dawning of the age of Aquarius, that great musical. Well, that's not just a musical. We are turning into the Aquarius age, but it's actually the Leo Aquarius age, because Aquarius is in the northern hemisphere, Leo is in the southern hemisphere, and that is a 26,000 year cycle that is turning now. So the white lions are highly relevant to humanity's evolution at this time. I'm going to share with you my story, and it's quite a story. I've got to summarize it. And then I'm going to make sure you ask me some questions, because I can't share the detail of a radical transformation with you apart from answering your questions. Essentially, I think my story is really relevant to you, however mythic it might sound. It was more than 3 decades ago when I was in the marketing, advertising, glamour industry, London, Paris, New York, and I had left South Africa because of an unjust regime. You'll remember the apartheid system. Now, we're all in an unjust regime that treats our earth so badly, but I was experiencing this in a country that had institutionalized abuse. So I left that country and followed my own career independent of my country. But Africa, when you know Africa, it calls you back to your roots. Whatever your culture, we all originated in Africa. So as this kind of high-flying advertising exec, I would keep being called back to the land of my origins. And on one of these journeys back home, an event happened that changed my life forever. I found myself in the middle of the wilderness, surrounded by 24 lions at night, without any way of getting out of that situation. And you'd need to read one of my books, because 2 of my editors said, you've got to start with that story. So I won't get the details to you, except to say I was facing my death that night, and it wasn't a dream. I was right there, surrounded by lions, and there was no way out of that situation. Just to give you a little more background, a friend of mine had an old Jeep. I was in the back of it. We'd gone out because we understood that a lioness was probably going to give birth in the wild. This was the days before safaris. This was the days before visitors went to South Africa, because South Africa was under sanction because of apartheid. 1991 was the year. Picture it, Nelson Mandela had just been released. So there I was in the middle of the wilderness, in a Jeep, trying to find a lioness that was giving birth to cubs, and suddenly surrounded by snarling, growling lions. That's how I perceived it. And I was with a couple of friends in this vehicle, and What had happened is my friend who was driving had broken the steering shaft because he'd gone gung-ho into the wilderness, and so he couldn't get out of that situation. Days before cell phones, so he couldn't get help. He had a radio, but there was no frequency where we were, and so we realized we were really trapped. What he did have was a light attached to a battery, and so every time we heard a snarl or a rustle, he'd swing it into the bushes, and there was a lion in a predatory crouch. And then again there'd be a rustle, and then he'd swing it, and there would be a low growl. Of course, once he lost his nerve, we all lost our nerves. And as you panic, when humans behave like prey, lions behave like cats. And the situation got worse and worse. And all this time, in the darkness, the light was starting to fade. And the question is it worse to see someone eaten in front of you, or is it better in the darkness and just to imagine what's happening? I mean, this is the way we were behaving. And because we were behaving that way, I believe maybe someone was going to be eaten alive. What were our options? I'm not going to tell you all the details, except to say I was rescued. Well, in the last light, a woman came walking through the lions in traditional medicine dress with beads and a baby strapped to her back. And she walked straight through the lions and calmed them and climbed into the vehicle with us. You'd have to read my book to know more, but that was the turning point of my life. I went back to the glamour industry, but nothing was the same again. I remember suddenly looking at my makeup and for the first time questioning what had happened to the animals who were experimented on to make that makeup. And then I was going to have my food and suddenly questioning what happened in the whole process of slaughter process of the steak that was sitting in front of me. For the first time, I was really seeing things from nature's perspective. I'd always been a nature lover, but to suddenly have everything looking completely different. And I realized that reality was back there in the wilderness, and the world that I was living was illusionary. So, to be honest, and I think we're all in that experience now, I started wrestling with this big decision that was rising in me. It was as if that medicine woman had carried a flame through the darkness as she calmed the lions, got into the vehicle and handed the flame to me, and it just kept burning and burning and burning as I couldn't get rid of that experience. And finally it blew up in my face and I had to return to Africa. It took 3 years of wrestling. But when I returned, I remember tracking her down, and actually she was known as the Lion Queen of Timbavati. She was a well-known medicine woman, and people would walk long distances to get her healing. So when I tracked her down to the village and she finally saw me, and through an interpreter she said, "What took you so long?" She had been expecting me, and in time she told me that my role was to be the protector of the white lions. But I had these burning questions to ask her, and I said to her, "How did you do that? How did you walk through the lions and they didn't harm you?" And she said, "There was no danger." And I said, "No, you took your grandchild into the jaws of death." And she said, "No, you were the aggressor. You took the jeep into the pride when a lioness was giving birth to cubs. Do you know that there was a little white cub that was being born under the tree there? And you drove straight into their sacred space." You can imagine my world was just turning around. And then, I was trying to make sense of a new way of seeing. And I said to her, "But how did you do that?" And she said, "The lions are my family. The only way to behave with nature is love and respect. And if you do, you will get love and respect in return, and that is the ancient contract. So, it is those principles that then, it's so simple. Why have we forgotten what is so simple and obvious? So it is those principles that have defined my life's path ever since that. But then her explaining that I was the keeper of the white lions, I mean, I had to earn that title over a period of time with her, but that was a huge calling, and it involved, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to summarize 30 years for you in 3 decades. The first decade, 1991, I'm telling you about, and then the next decade, and then the next decade. Whoops. I'm going to keep still here. The next decade takes us right up to COVID now. So to conclude that first decade, see? How's this? A bit better, a bit more stable. Yeah. So the experience of that first decade was to uncover the mystery of the white lions. Why are these animals who had always entered my dreams as a child, why are they regarded as so sacred? And as indigenous knowledge was shared with me, these knowledge systems about the sanctity of nature and the fact that these luminous animals have returned in our time as nature's messengers to help guide us through the challenges that lie ahead as humanity reconfigures the mess that we've created on our planet. That's what I came to understand as their purpose for reappearing after being mythical animals in storybooks. Now suddenly they were in the wild. So it was an incredibly exciting awakening for me as to what their role is as luminaries. But at the same time, I was uncovering an alternative narrative, which was a horror story. Every time they occurred in the wild, they would be forcibly removed, either by trophy hunters coming from foreign parts, who would come, track them down and hunt them for trophy heads on walls. American trophy hunters largely, I have to say. And this, as I was uncovering the truth, I was getting factual evidence that this dated back as far as 6 decades prior. Every time they occurred in this sacred site of their origins in the wild, they would be forcibly removed. Hunters, zoos and circuses around the globe, and that includes Siegfried and Roy, who were a part of the main perpetrators, removing them, taking them to Las Vegas and making, $1 million industry out of that. And worse, they were being stolen from the wild into factory farms where they were being bred as tame lions that you could cuddle, and then those tame lions would later be shot as tame animals. So, this horror started unfolding, and as I tracked it, I realized I was dealing with a mafia industry, because these industries are interconnected. Trade in animal parts, child prostitution, gun running, internationally, it's all the same kind of syndicates. So it suddenly became quite dangerous. And essentially, these dual stories taking place of these unbelievable animals. By the time I had returned those 3 years later, I discovered that they were technically extinct in the wild because of these continual removals. And then I linked up with a lion ecologist, and we were tracking lions in the wild. And he was the lion ecologist of this place called Timbavati, which is the only place on earth where they occur. That's where the incident had happened. And he witnessed 2 lions being stolen from the wild, 2 golden lions. And this was now at the end of that millennium. I'm just going to keep still here. And I realized I had to trace those lions back and find where they were going. And they ended up in a place called Bethlehem, South Africa. Okay, the other thing you need to know is that I had recurring dreams as a child of a lion coming into my dream, standing over me, roaring at me, and I would wake up screaming, and the lion would roar, and then I'd scream, and then it would roar. And I told the medicine woman about this recurring dream, and she said, well, as long as you scream at your lion, he's going to roar at you. Accept him, and he will become your guardian. This lion I then later met in the wild. And no sooner had I met him than he was identified to be hunted down as a trophy. The medicine woman said to me, he's the last lion in the wild carrying the white lion gene. The golden lions would carry white lion genes, some of them. And she said, he must be protected at all costs. So I attempted to protect him. I went to the warden and I said, that lion could be the last lion carrying the secret code of the white lions. And he said to me, prove it. And I realized I had no way of proving that he was the last lion. You had to prove it scientifically. It took another decade working with scientists to prove that the white lions have a secret sacred coding. But at the time, I had no way to prove he was the last lion with this coding. So they ended up hunting him down, and it was really the most tragic event that I experienced. What I didn't know is that he had been, as the dominant male, he'd been mating with various prides, so his genes were protected, and it would be much later that the white lions would return to the wild as his genetic code. So I'm giving you a crash course in the first decade. This knowledge system that was so profound on the one hand and so devastating on the other hand, with lions being stolen and then an eyewitness account. Okay. After this lion had been hunted down, I almost gave up this journey of understanding the importance of the white lions. And then the medicine people said to me, sometimes king die before the birth of a queen. Then I learned that a white lion cub had been born in Bethlehem on Christmas Day. This killing camp, a white lion cub was born there. And it was the child of those 2 lionesses who had been stolen from the wild, eyewitnessed by my partner. So we're now talking about the next millennium, 2000. It suddenly became clear to me that I had to rescue this specific lioness and return her back into the wild because I knew her mother had been stolen. But it was one of these mafia places. Anyway, that second decade, I had to get real about what was a mythical story. I had published a book called Mystery of the White Lions, which delivered this story to the world, but now I had to get real about how do I protect them. And so I founded the Global White Lion Protection Trust, non-profit organization. I published my book so the world would know about this mystery and the horror simultaneously. And then I got police involved and raided this this place in Bethlehem, and managed eventually. It took 5 years of daily struggle, but I managed to get this lioness back into the wild with her cubs. The first white lions who had walked in the wild for over nearly 2 decades by that stage. So that was a triumph, but the only way to do that was to get really practical, hands on the ground. We had to raise funds for land, because what's the point of returning lions back to the wilderness if they're just going to be hunted again? So we had to buy large tracts of land bordering the ecosystem. And amongst our friends here, there's a very dear friend, Jane McGregor, who we have a mutual friend who came forward from Hollywood, Cheryl Leach, creator of Barney the Purple Dinosaur, and she donated funds for that land to ensure the return of the white lion. So I'm honoring her here today as one of the great benefactors in our project. So Hollywood isn't just glamour and stars. There is a huge heart that can be activated here. And the true stars are these star lions who are understood to be luminaries returning in our times. So the second decade really was to get down on the ground and create a project that was meaningful and get these lions back to the wilderness where they belong. There were global marches that we helped activate at that time, raising awareness. Some of you might remember Cecil the white lion, who was gunned down at that time, and that raised a lot of awareness. It's triggered the heart of humanity globally, and many of us marched in those marches. All this time I was trying to get legislation changed so that these death camps for lions would be shut down legally. But they kept morphing, and they kept getting worse and worse as we were closing doors, so they found another way to morph. And you'll see, I'm going to hand over now with a very short retrospective, just how this industry kept changing. And eventually, they were breeding lions for tourists to hug, and then these same tame lions would be put in cages and starved to death for the lion bone trade. Now, I'm sorry to share the hideousness of this industry, but I think it's an index of our consumerist model that has just gone too far. You know, this model that treats Earth for pure consumption ended up breeding lions for consumption in the Eastern markets, the so-called lion bone trade. So it truly got worse and worse, but at the same time, I was securing more and more land, and the lions were flourishing on the borders of their ecosystem. So into the third decade, that really was the expansive decade, leading all the way up to COVID, where more and more land, we managed to secure more and more land, and the lions were flourishing in the midst of this disastrous situation. Bring us to COVID. All of us experienced an initiation. You're hearing my initiation with the medicine woman, but that was a global initiation. However we want to look at it, we as humanity have not emerged from that untransformed. Something utterly profound happened there, and a part of the key transformation was that for a period of time, all of us were locked up, like many wild animals have had to suffer over the decades, over the centuries. We were locked up. But this is a story of hope that I'm sharing, and much more than hope. This is a story of resurgence. What I want to say is, do you remember what happened to nature when we were locked up for once? Do you remember the reports that airways, with the airways shutting down, that mountains that hadn't been seen for decades in parts of the world were suddenly revealing themselves in all their glory. That dolphins were swimming into waterways in Venice and Florence after hundreds of years of never being seen there. Nature is capable of restoring herself. That was the big revelation for all of us. We have to find our true humanity and our true natures again. But that's good news. She's capable of restoring herself. This is Gaia. This is a conscious, sentient planet. She's been waiting for us to wake up. Huh? That is really good news. And that is the reality that I work within. I'm going to show you evidence of that in my project. Nature can restore herself. So we'll get to that. What I'd like to share with you is a very brief retrospective of those 30 years, so you can bring it right up to today. And then I'm going to show you how the lions restore their ecosystem, and then I want to hear from you. How this is all achieved is through love and respect. I came to realize that love is the greatest force. It can get us through anything. And I think that that's a profound lesson for humanity at this time. The Leo Aquarius age, what is it? Aquarius, the qualities of Aquarius is the advanced human, the technological human, the mastermind, the sense that we are superior, the sense that we can dominate our environment without any consequences, that we are masters of, the higher mind. And of course that can lead to huge inflation and ego. Huge inflation and ego. So that is what Aquarius is, the higher human potentially, the human who can, obviously it's artificial intelligence, but remember, artificial intelligence is based on natural intelligence. There isn't any intelligence that is not ultimately based on the source codes. So if we are at this brink of turning into the Leo Aquarius age, what is the Leo component of that? And Leo, throughout time in the calendars, is the divinely appointed governor, the animal associated with the sun, with the source, with the solar power, with the principle of true pride, community, leadership in every way, but ultimately associated with heart and the heart of gold. That is, the lion is the lion heart. So what is facing us as humanity at this time is a decision that we make that will either lead to our own extinction or our own evolution into the higher human. But we cannot achieve that without the heart. If we think we can govern our planet through artificial intelligence and other technological devices, independent of responsibility for Earth, then that is the neurosis that precedes the fall of humanity. We will bring about our own extinction at this point. So we are at a precipice, and we are facing the opportunity to reconnect with our planet at this time like never before. Because we now know that nature is actually reclaiming her dominion. She's in charge here. She loves us with all her heart, but she's not going to wait for us to wake up any longer. As she restores herself, she's inviting us to come with her in this co-sentience, in this harmonious coexistence, which is the original golden age consciousness that all the calendars of ages reference. They reference that at the beginning of time as we know it, our consciousness was part of a golden age harmonious coexistence where we actually could speak with the animals, there are a lot of animal communicators, friends of mine here today. And I'm pleased to say animal communication is now a knowledge system that is being recognized by universities for the first time, and scientific forums. You'll see, if we get the retrospective to work, that just before COVID, I presented at Davos, the World Economic Forum, which is the kind of hub of consumerism. That's where our whole economic model was based. But I presented nature's perspective there, from nature's point of view, because I speak for the lion. And at the end of this tour that I'm going on, it ends in Davos again, where the World Economic Forum is based. But now, a scientific forum has invited animal communicators to speak on how we're going to save our planet. Science and that old knowledge system of how to speak across species barriers are finally coming to find each other. So I'm actually very optimistic about the future in the midst of the crisis. And as we're waiting for that retrospective, I'd like to invite questions from you.
How do you donate?
Thank you. You're asking how can you donate? Brilliant. Well, you'll see when you see my project, there are various ways in which you could donate for lions, land, or people in my project. And it's as simple as getting one of those cards. They're actually printed cards, and they have a QR code which links to our website and shows you where your donation's going to go. So we'll get you a card. Everyone can get a card. Thank you.
How do you sponsor a lion?
Now that's as simple as going onto our website and choosing the lion. And these are lions who are wild, who are doing what they're meant to do in restoring Earth and restoring the ecosystem. But they all have personalities. They all have epic stories. So you will find that one totally resonates with you. Like the Ingwavuma, who was my lion, who was hunted. Well, guess what? He reincarnated into our lifetimes, and Ingwavuma the second is this magnificent lion who's back in the wild. So he might be your choice. But there are 29 lions in 4 different prides roaming the land of their origin now. Thanks for that question. That is a really pertinent question. Do I walk amongst them? To be honest, I know that I can. And there have been a couple of occasions by mistake. I'll tell you a very humorous story if you want to hear about that. This is an intimate sharing. I remember lifetimes when I lived with lions as a priestess in Egypt. And I would have their cubs suckle on me. And my babies would be suckling with the lionesses, clear as day memory. But in this lifetime, the best thing I can do is to ensure their freedom in the wild. But I'll tell you a humorous story, as we seem to have a bit of time here. In the early days, when we were releasing this lioness back into the wild, and the world believed she would never rewild herself because it had taken 5 years to get her out of that death camp. In those early days, I was tracking in a Land Rover behind her, trying to hope that she would learn how to hunt, and she did, no problem. But my lion ecologist partner at the time, we were in the back of the Land Rover, and he inadvertently got out of the vehicle to go and make a pee behind a tree, only to find that she was walking by with her cubs. He hadn't checked before he did so. So I remember witnessing him, and the lion Mara was just walking past, kind of greeting him, And he was completely unaware that she had just walked past. I'm saying, truly, that whole predator-prey thing is completely different from what we believe through our perception of how nature works. It's a peaceful, loving system. When you live in the ecosystem, it is pure love, every single minute of the day. Okay. So what's the question?
The name of the lion and what happened to its tail.
Okay, so, but now we're getting very esoteric. We can come back to that, but it's like really getting deep into the mystery.
We can come back to it if you want, that's it.
Okay,
I had a very special experience with that lion.
okay. Yes?
I would love to know what the driving force behind your life mission is. What is
So the question is, what is the driving force behind my life's mission?
yeah, but specifically, what is intuition? Why do you have those dreams? Why do you have that intense, strong calling, or specifically why not?
So the question is, why do I have that intense, strong calling specifically for the white lions? I think I'm in this form, you know, I'm a white woman from Africa, but I believe that I had to be that form so that I could cross cultures and represent all cultures, because the white lions are luminaries. They actually, the reason they're white is because they're all the colors of the rainbow in one, you know, that's what light is. And so they don't allow cultural divides, they don't allow gender divides. I might come back to that question, obviously it's a long answer, but let's look at the retrospective and then see what other questions you have.